Hello, everyone. I am live. You are not yet live. All right. Well, okay. So, YouTube, waiting on YouTube and Facebook. And I believe we are good. Yes. Hello. All right. Well, I will start with, well, actually, no, there's comments asking if I've made YouTube mad. And the numbers are going down instead of up. Okay, now there's people saying hello. So, okay. All right. So now we know we're good. All right, let's see. We have Robert Graham in the chat talking about bagels. Oh, a bagel sounds really good. Uh Nomad0036, we have Cap and Mac, Leonidas Alberia, Michael Tomlinson, Talisman, Andrew Kang, Bruce the Boss Resurrected. Let's see. Let me scroll down a little bit because you guys are chatting. We have Lenio Barcelos. I think that's a new one. I don't remember that name. We have Uncle Mike, SH, Jonathan Stevie, getting his rifles out for cleaning. Cleaning. Q, Broken Prophet. Let's scroll down some more. Chavez Head is in the house. Squid Monkey, Tim Allen, Kirk Morrison, Mark M, Michael J, Jesse Sowell, Perry Stark, Shadow Bear. I feel like I haven't seen you here in a while. Aaron Miller, Midnight. That's a good one. Tony from Washington State, Fish and Golf and Guns. Let's see who else. Did I just see Jesse Sowell? Yes, I did. David Neal, Rusty Shackelford. Benjamin Sholnick, Carolina Infidel, Jeff Wiles, Bill Osby. In from Virginia, we have Jesse Meek. Whoops. And okay, let's see. Philip Mullis, Tex Bolivar, No Cage, Tess, William Livers or Livers, Free Bird, Aaron Miller, Glocks are for kids. That's cute. Vintage Moments, Michael Clark, Jeff Wiles, Jason Wise, P. Taylor, Dave Simmons. And all right, prepping in Pisgah. Say no to it, the autistic veteran, James Davidson. Already asking for tips and advice. Gecko in from Utah. Nye Noseridne says free tacos for the unvaxxed. Oh, now I want tacos. Sean Torno, 50 TNCSA, George Treepwood, gray-haired mountain biker, dog soldier. Lots of folks in the house today. Jennifer Winkler, the Patriot Paladin. Christoph is moving his RV to the mountain. That is not a bad plan, sir. Gary Guyman says if you're not making YouTube mad, you're effing up. You got sniped. Lynn Kramer, Ricky L. Hendricks, Hillary Clinton says hello from the depths of the deep state. The Lost One, PC Gaming, Art Grote, Steve Crins, Incognito A Dubs, Mike Sharp, Tim Boyer, Frosty Leprechaun, Stephen Lestick, Omega is in, Jeff TBD, Anthony Johnson, and Ken O. And now we have our intro from Trashman. Live from a hidden location in the USSA, it's the resistance leader who ran out of patience 8 months ago. Facts. Doesn't need six-prong anything and knows what tornadoes are still called. So with that, here's Dolly. Yeah, my patience, I did run out. About 8 months ago this year. That is correct. You are not wrong, sir. Bruce the Boss Resurrected said, even with a short week and hurricane to worry about, Biden managed to make things worse with vaccine mandate like he's daring for a civil war. LOL. I didn't even know there was a hurricane to worry about, but let me tell you, I'll tell you what, in the words of Hank Hill, strange and crazy things are afoot, even in the folks in my mommy groups on Facebook, like my pregnancy support and like mommy groups. Even they're talking about like, oh man, like, do we have to worry about getting locked and loaded? There's talks of secession. There are private meetups happening. There's petitions going around. People are freaking out, and within good reason. A lot of people are freaking out that their loved ones are going to be losing their jobs. They are freaking out about like, okay, like our Fed boy is going to be coming door to door. They're freaking out about, if there is like mass layoffs because of this, the unemployment and how that'll affect the economy and all of these things. And you know what? Those are pretty valid concerns. I'm not going to lie. And I just saw that Andy is in too. Hello, Andy. But I mean, there are some good news. For example, SH says that Chippy got kicked out this week, and he did. In fact, that was breaking news that we had yesterday. I think it was. Yesterday. I mean, it totally got overshadowed by everything going on with Biden. So I'll give you guys the good news, and then if anyone missed it, we'll go over the main issues with Biden's new mandate. And then I don't know. We'll just chat, I guess. The format of this is going to be a little bit different, as you can see from the description. Like, I'm going to be chatting more with you guys and reading some of your comments and things like that, because I'll be completely honest with you. This week has been a roller coaster of a week. And it's funny because one of the things that I was talking about with my husband recently is like, man, all of us people that talk about the news and political things on Facebook and on YouTube, I mean, you can watch me, you can watch Matt, you can watch Tim Pool, you can watch any of these people. And you can even look at the stats on some of these websites like Social Blade, and you'll see that for everyone, views are down across the board. And I was talking with my husband about it, and one of the reasons I was talking with him about it is I am starting tomorrow. I'm officially in my last week of the second trimester. This really funky thing happens to you in the third trimester. I'm told that it's totally normal and to not worry about it. But the thing that happens to you in the third trimester is you suddenly start to worry about everything. Everything. I was just saying a couple of weeks ago how I've had this really easygoing, relaxed, and stress-free pregnancy. And then on Tuesday, it was like a switch flipped, and all of a sudden, I am like a vibrating, anxious ball of stress, even though there's not really anything particularly stressful to be worried about. But then this happens. And anyway, so I was talking to my husband about it, because then there's all these worries of like, oh, well, how am I going to help support the baby? What happens if YouTube goes down? Well, I have my therapy license. Well, what if I decide I still hate doing therapy with, these pro-mask, pro-vaccine mandate people? And it's like, all right, well, what's my backup? Well, what if the backup fails? And what if the backup to the backup fails? And it just kind of swirls and spirals down into the toilet. And so we were talking about, well, I mean, it's not just me if we're seeing these lower numbers all across the board. And, it's just people that they're burnt out of this political mess and everything that's happening in the world. And as he put it, the narrative that Biden and the media is selling to people is a flat out nightmare. But the fact that the narrative that they're pushing isn't even true, and the stuff that's really going on behind the scenes with a lot of this stuff is even more of a nightmare. And there's a lot of people that just can't take that anymore for their own sanity. They don't want to hear about it. They're done. They're burned out. They just can't take it anymore, and that's pretty valid. I've had weeks like that myself, and this week was one of those weeks. I was feeling better and I was like, all right, cool. Like I had a pretty calm day yesterday, and then Biden comes out with this shit. And it just set everything off all over again. And like I said, people now are freaking out all over social media that I've seen of like, well, okay, well, what happens to my job? What happens to my husband's job or my wife's job or, my mother's job or whoever else in the family? What happens to my friends? What happens to healthcare facilities where people have been walking out already over some of these mandates, and now the federal government is coming down and saying, oh, yes, you have to get vaccinated or you're going to have a $14,000 fine. Unemployment is already a pretty big deal and a big problem right now. And they're already talking about how the hospitals and medical system is completely overwhelmed. And then you're going to have people that are going to get fired over this. And in some instances, they say, well, then you can do testing every week. Well, fine. There's nothing about that testing being covered. And at the same time, the government is like, well, we're contracting with Amazon and Walmart to provide these tests at cost. So then are you going to have people that, okay, if they choose to do the weekly testing instead, and it said a minimum of weekly, we'll go through that in a bit. I mean, are they going to have to be paying out of pocket? And then, once you read his announcement, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, testing is an option. But then also OSHA's going to make it a rule that if you're not vaccinated, you have to present and be sent to your company's HR department to receive, quote, counseling and discipline up to and including termination. So they're not really giving people an option. And so there's a lot of folks that are worried about that. And luckily, there's a lot of governors that have already come out and said that they're going to fight it. South Carolina is one of them. There's already a petition going around that's been put out by Rep. Stewart. And I believe I believe he's a Mises guy. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure he is. He's got a petition going around that people are signing. They're calling an emergency session for the state GOP. The governor has come out and he used Biden's own words and said he was going to be fighting Biden to the gates of hell, which is nice, but it shouldn't even come to this point. It's such an overreach that is beyond anything even remotely resembling constitutional power. John Morgan says that there are companies talking about putting people on unpaid leave indefinitely so they can say they were sacked over it. Yeah. And SH says time to become self-employed. I mean, yesterday I have never been happier to be self-employed so that I don't have to worry about, well, I mean, I'm still worrying, but I don't have to worry the same way that other people are worrying about this stuff. And thank you, Kuchu Lane, for the love. Thank you. P. Taylor says that counseling is indoctrination. Sue them for PTSD. I mean, the problem is, I've talked about it on the show before. The mental health field is overwhelmingly very liberal and very progressive. And I don't want to say that it's an indoctrination, but the people that are providing these services definitely are at times very indoctrinated. And it's not clear whether this counseling people are going to have to get is in fact like mental health counseling, or kind of like when your HR department is like, well, you made this bad comment, so you have to go to diversity training and receive diversity counseling. I mean, we don't know if that's what it is. I mean, because all of this is still being drawn up. It's just we had Jen Psaki do a press conference, which was laughable, because also this week or this past week, The Intercept broke documents that proved once again that Fauci lied about funding gain-of-function research when he testified before Congress. And that was something that we talked about on the stream, and we went through all of the evidence pointing to the fact that he was lying when like those emails came out, and now there are more documents proving it. And Peter Ducey, I'm not really sure how to say his name. I believe he works for Fox. That man is a firebrand, let me tell you. And he is always on Jen Psaki's ass, and it's amazing to see. It's really great. And he was kind of interrogating her about that, and like, oh, so is Fauci's job still safe? And she said, yes, it is. And then he moved on to how the Biden administration has been saying how professional and cooperative and businesslike the Taliban has been in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, people are falling off of planes trying to get out of the country. And she's like, oh yes, they've been very cooperative and businesslike. And he pulls out this wanted poster, and he's like, do you realize the person you're talking about is wanted by the FBI and there's a bounty on him? And she just like blubbered her way through that. And then someone else said, what happened to my body, my choice with these vaccine mandates? And she just walked off stage. She just gathered her little folders up and just booked it. And then Biden had his press conference, and blah. It was a lot. It was a lot that was going on yesterday. I don't remember where I was going with that train of thought, but yeah, Jennifer Winkler says Biden is tougher on Americans than he is on the Taliban. I mean, yeah, they've got they've got fucking Black Hawk helicopters. They've got howitzers. They've got all this stuff, and he's all over here being like, I'm banning Russian ammo and tanking 40% of the ammo market. I am forcing vaccines beyond my constitutional power on everyday Americans. And mind you, again, we've mentioned on the show before, we've looked at the statistics. The unvaccinated are disproportionately poor people and people of color. So who's going to get tanked over this? Black people. But, that's not racist. Because it's unvaccinated. Just blah. Squid Monkey says that his company is a government contractor. Management is trying to figure out what to do. We recently got bought out by a Canadian company too, interesting, rather. Tweak FPV says mandate schmandate. All right, I'm going to go into the super chats here, and I'm at least going to give you some of the good news before we keep talking about all of the bad news. Let's see. Also, oh, that's weird. The dates are weird here. So there was a couple super chats that came in last week just as I was like closing out the live window. So I'll read those first. One was from Good Thankful Duckspeak. I think it's cutting off the name because it's long. It says, love from Canada. Send us up some of those Southern blessings. We're going to need them because most Canadians don't know who our intel agencies are. Well, I don't think we have blessings to send anymore. And Tim says, cheers to everyone enjoying their shots. I mean, that's still relevant to that. to today's topics. So Justin Baumgartner says, you think this latest Biden speech is a declaration of war on unvaxxed Americans? If so, which ones in the government are actually fighting for us? Well, there are certainly people on social media that are saying that it's basically a declaration of war. And I don't have the clips pulled up readily, but we can find them. He flat out says, well, this isn't about freedom and it isn't about choice. He talks about how there are governors that are banning mask mandates and that he's coming for them. And well, so who has banned mask mandates? Well, DeSantis did in Florida, and a couple of weeks ago his ban on mask mandates got thrown out, but we'll see in a second. It has been reinstated. South Carolina has a ban on mask mandates and vaccine passports. And I'm sure there's a few other states within that realm. Who in the government is actually fighting for you? I'm not sure. Honestly, I will say the GOP likes to talk the talk, but they don't often walk the walk. So I don't know. I don't know about individual senators, representatives, or anything on the federal level, except for Rand Paul, for sure. Thomas Massie has already come out and said that he is going to be fighting this as well and working for medical freedom. So definitely those two. But I mean, those are the key players. They're always fighting everything the government tries to do. Otherwise, I'm not really sure. This is probably something that's going to have to be fought on the state level. And there are a list of governors that have already come out and said they're fighting it. The Daily Wire is starting a lawsuit. I have articles on all of that pulled up so we can see exactly who the big players in that are. Gardner says, go LD, light the fires, woman. A lot of LLCs are going to be formed. Yeah, and you know what? I just formed my new one here in South Carolina, and it was a total of $110, and that reminds me I have to scan in that paperwork and email it to someone. Whoops. Kachulaine, thank you for the donation. I'm probably saying that wrong, and I apologize. Gardner also says, oh, and by that, I mean single proprietor LLCs for hire to replace full-time employees. This rampant unconstitutionality seems to prove Spooner's point. Faux show. Definitely. Definitely. I've seen memes of people where it's like, oh, you know, this company is laying off their 100th employee so they don't have to abide by this. Tony brings up a really good point. He says, good luck with people losing their jobs to pay any taxes. That's a really good point. And hello, Summer told. David Neal says Biden is also trying to kick off Trump appointments to military academies, advisory boards, even if the law says a 3-year term. Interesting. I had not heard of that. David Souza says, yeah, but Biden is going to create a position for Chippy on his staff. Gunzar. I did not know that yet. Learn something new every day. Summer told says, I'm worried about our livelihoods now. How can this be happening? I am surprised, but not at the same time. I mean, on the one hand, I kind of saw something like this coming. And maybe not. I figured that at some point he would try to do some kind of federal mandate. I just wasn't sure what. I thought the first thing was actually going to be the mandate that he's been tossing around on interstate travel. That's what I thought the first one was going to be. I thought there was going to be a couple of steps before he got to actual federal mandates on private companies. But as soon as the FDA gave approval to the Pfizer vaccine, he came out and was like urging private companies and employers to mandate. And that was just what, 2 weeks ago that he was saying that. Then we had the bill introduced in Congress that I did the video on last week of putting unvaccinated people on the no-fly list. So I really thought that we were heading in the direction of the interstate travel first, not this mandate on private businesses. So I like I said, like I thought we were going to get here eventually. I did not think that it was going to be this quickly at all. Destiny Troll says, "Hey LD, sorry I'm late. What did I miss?" Just a general recap of the news so far. We haven't actually gone into much of the details yet, but there's not going to be a ton of detail. I mean, there's going to be details, but I'm not going to be, sitting here reading articles for you guys. Justin Baumgartner says, "If it's war, then quote the great Sergeant Terrence Popp, let's pick a fight." Yeah. I have to be careful what kind of things are said on YouTube, but I'm hearing similar things from people. I think that some folks have some interesting ideas in the chat talking about, okay, switching over to LLCs or 1099s. As Cap and Max says, the problem with being 1099 employees is then having to pay 100% of payroll taxes and making quarterly income tax filings. Well, what I will say about that is if you are a 1099 employee, there's a whole hell of a lot of things that you can write off, especially if you get yourself a really good accountant. And yes, technically you are supposed to make quarterly tax payments, and you get penalized if you don't, but the penalty is actually pretty low. And normally I do file quarterly, but I haven't so far this year because I was buying a house, and then it was like, oh well, okay, we moved in and 2 days later found out we were pregnant. But also, I mean, finances and money is kind of a game. And the way that inflation is going right now, and I have a little headline about that as well. The way that inflation is going right now, the dollar is dropping so dramatically that, quite frankly, if you wait and make your quarterly payments later, you're sort of paying them less money because the dollar amount is still the same, but the purchasing power of that dollar is tanking by the day. So you're actually better off utilizing that money for capital now than doing it later. And there are financial gurus that will tell you that it's kind of like you're basically like getting an interest-free loan right now. It's kind of like as if you got like a 0% credit card or something like that and utilized it, because, $10 today is very different from $10 this time next year, the way that inflation is going. And I'm not telling people to commit tax fraud, YouTube, or anything like that. It's just basic economics of inflation and dollar values and things like that. Lenio Barcelos, man, you guys are messing me up with all the food talk because I'm getting really hungry here. Now he's talking about a Butterfinger. Y'all, I do have to tell you, though, this is a little concerning because I have my glucose test on Friday, or next Thursday, rather, to make sure that I don't have gestational diabetes. And it's my husband's birthday this week. And with all his food allergies, we couldn't find a cake that would fit his allergies that he wanted. So I baked him a chocolate cake with peanut butter buttercream frosting. And it is bomb. And I'm like, man, should I really be eating this like a few days in a row, a week before I take a diabetes test? But anyways. Anyways. Fernando says it's time for a divorce. Why do I have to share a government with people who don't care about civil liberties? Well, I mean, that is one of the things that's been tossed around a little bit, was peaceful divorce, but a lot of the folks that I talk to about that say there's no way at this point that it could be peaceful with the things the government is doing. Like, they would never allow that to happen. And, here's a prime example. And this is just something that happened today. And this is such a small scale, like microcosm of what is happening on a national and to some degree global scale. And so one of my mom groups that I'm in, it's this crunchy natural mom group. And getting into this thing was so hard. It was like when you try to convert to Judaism or whatever, and you get rejected 3 times, and the 4th time they let you in. It was a lot like that. I had to apply to this group 4 times. I had to message admins. I had to friend request admins so they could see my profile and all this stuff, because I keep everything under lock and key after I got doxxed last June for, oh no, being a gun owner in Massachusetts. So horrible, such a crime. So anyways, this group, right? It's really hard to get into. And there's rules about, no posting screenshots outside and blah, 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 things like that. But it turns out that there was someone who in the group who was sharing screenshots. And there was a group of women in 2 separate mommy groups in the area, local groups. And one of them was called upstate progressive parents or something, and the other one was liberal moms of the upstate progressive and liberal groups. And these groups were conspiring to set up troll accounts to infiltrate the crunchy mom groups, this specific crunchy mom group, in order to get names of people that weren't vaccinated against COVID or were planning to not vaccinate their children against COVID, so they could call Child Protective Services. No lie. There was someone else that was in these liberal mom groups and shared the screenshots of oh my God, this is what's happening. Not only that, there is one pediatrician in the area that takes a more crunchy and holistic approach, and I'm really disappointed that he's not taking new patients right now, because he has this whole blog on his website about keeping the police state out of the medical field. I shit you not, this guy is a diamond in the rough of doctors. And these 2 liberal mommy groups have also been putting together joint efforts to report him to the medical board and the licensing board to try to get him to shut down, because he's not calling CPS on people that aren't vaccinating against COVID. It is fucking insanity. And this is in South Carolina. And the funny thing is these women were like, oh my God, they were so shocked that anything like this could happen and people could be this vile. And I was like, yeah, that's why I left Massachusetts, because this shit is everywhere there. This is how blue states operate. And that is just in mommy groups. Can you imagine if any states actually do attempt any sort of peaceful divorce or start to enact this process? If just the moms can't handle people not getting vaccines against COVID in a red state, imagine when Massachusetts and New York and California and Jersey get together to, go after Florida or South Carolina or Texas or Alabama. I really don't know how this is going to end, you guys. And the crazy thing is, Biden's only been in office since January. We still got a little over 3 years to go. I don't know. I don't know. Jesse Sell says great distraction from any forensic audits on voting. Yeah, there's that too. There's that. Victoria C. Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the things that people are talking. I mean, it's bad when even in mom groups they're like, "Oh my God, is there going to be a civil WAR thing? Is there going to be secession? Like what?" I mean, it's bad when even just everyday regular people are looking at the situation and speculating that that's where it could go. Steve says reverse secession, kick out the kick. Where did it go? Oh, reverse secession. Let's kick out the Northeast and left coast. I mean, I could be on board with that. Wondering Lisa says impeach Sleepy Joe. That might be something that comes up. I don't even know what's going on with the articles of impeachment that were introduced against Blinken for Afghanistan. I haven't seen anything about that since this all blew up. I mean, you know what? It's probably a distraction from the shit going on in Afghanistan. And I know I'm swearing at you guys tonight, but it is what it is. All right, so I'm gonna give you some good news headlines. Highlander says Western Mass needs to peacefully divorce from Eastern Massachusetts. Yeah, you know, and it's funny, a lot of the folks that I know in Massachusetts that are against this, like their companies were already mandating vaccines. So, I mean, it's not anything new to them, but I don't understand the folks that are staying there. I mean, yes, Massachusetts is Eastern Mass is the center for like biomedical stuff right now, but even those businesses are moving into other states and southern states just for the tax breaks alone. It's not going to stay in these states, and Massachusetts is already on a town and city basis enacting mask mandates. A friend of mine was going to be getting married next year in New York, and with the proof of vaccination requirements for venues, she had to switch to Boston. But Boston has an interim mayor right now because Marty Walsh. Marty Walsh is heading up Biden's Department of Labor right now, which is laughable. Absolutely laughable. But so he's in the Biden administration, Mayor Marty Walsh. And so there's like an interim mayor in Boston. And all the folks that are running for mayor in Boston support these vaccine passports. So, okay, she had to hoof it again. And now it's going to be in Florida. But, you know, and unemployment is still bad in these blue states, and with this this mandate for vaccines and this new rule that Biden is telling OSHA they need to put in place, it's going to get even worse. And I mean, I get that not everyone can just do like we did and literally throw half your stuff in the garbage and put the rest of it on the lawn for a tag sale, yard sale, whatever you call it in your area. I realize that not everyone can do that and just literally like pick up and go. But I mean, if you're still in these states, like, I mean, I worry that you're going to get trapped. And you're going to get to a point where you can't leave, even if you wanted to. And it's just, I have no idea what that's going to look out. I mean, we've been telling all of the people that we care about that's still up there, like, dude, you need to get out, and you need to get out now before it's too late. And they're not listening to us, which is really disappointing. Steve says that he can't move out of Rhode Island, financially can't move, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, some people are in that situation, but the people that have the means to do so right now and just aren't, I don't know, man. And I don't want to be all doom and gloom. But I don't know. But let's do some good news. We'll interject some good news here before we get into some of the details. For anyone who didn't follow the press conference and doesn't know all the details, we'll get to that in a sec, but we'll do some fancy good news first. So this was over at the Truth About Guns yesterday, and this broke before the dreaded press conference and Biden's speech. Biden administration throws in the towel and will withdraw the Chipman nomination as ATF director. So, they have a little tidbit from the Washington Post that says the White House is planning to withdraw David Chipman's nomination to run the ATF this week amid bipartisan pushback over his gun control advocacy, according to two people with knowledge of the decision. The funny thing is other outlets are blaming the GOP entirely and saying it's the GOP's fault when it was bipartisan issues, because one side was like, well, hey, you can't have a member of a gun control organization running the ATF. It's a conflict of interest. And you had the other side being like, oh man, this guy's made some pretty racist comments. And even as they say, Chipman was always an audacious nomination, and that Biden was trying to install a paid gun control lobbyist to run the nation's federal firearms regulatory agency, and it was every bit as ballsy as a GOP president nominating Wayne LaPierre. I don't know about that. Wayne LaPierre ain't that great. But when Chipman's serial lies and allegations of past racist comments came up, allegations no one has bothered to refute, which is pretty surprising to me at the end of the day. The end of his nomination became only a matter of time. Even a handful of red and purple state Democrats let it be known, sometimes by saying nothing, at least publicly, that they wouldn't vote for him. So this says, will the administration's next nominee be any friendlier to gun rights? Please, will they choose someone who hasn't openly called for regulating ARs like machine guns and openly disparaged law-abiding gun owners like Chipman did? They will if they're smart, and if they do, whoever they pick might be just as big of a threat, but more difficult to defeat. So this article does not say anything about Chipman still being part of the Biden administration. There's not a timestamp on this beyond the date, but I did see that Jared posted a video yesterday saying, oh, we won, Chipman withdrawn, but then I saw he posted a video later about like Chipman being back or something. So I'm not sure the status of that. Let's see, David Chipman, let's put him into DuckDuckGo real quick. Yeah, I'm just seeing that the White House has officially withdrawn his nomination. This had a 2:00 update from CNN. Let's see. Announced it in a statement on Thursday, put the blame on Republicans for the inability to get him confirmed, even though there have been concerns among moderate Democrats and independent Maine Senator Angus King, as well as GOP senators, over Chipman's past record on gun control. So I'm glad that even CNN is saying, like, hey, yeah, there were some Democrats here too. Biden said that he would have been an exemplary director of the ATF. Unfortunately, Republicans in Congress have made clear that they intend to use gun crime as a political talking point instead of taking serious steps to address it. How about Biden using vaccines and masks as a political talking point? But, whatever. Senior administration official told CNN the move was made after the White House realized we do not have the votes. We will land him in a non-confirmed job in the administration. All right, so whoever said that in the chat is right. But it doesn't say what that position might be. The withdrawal of Chipman comes as Democrats have struggled to overcome GOP resistance. Yep. It doesn't say what that position might be, but you know what? It might be a gun control czar. We have a COVID czar. We have a border czar now, because that's a thing. Absolutely insane. We have other good news. A court, as of today, has reinstated DeSantis's mask mandate ban in Florida schools. This one is from Axios, so it's not going to be a positive spin, but they usually have at least like good bullet points here. So the First District Court of Appeals on Friday granted Florida Governor DeSantis approval to uphold an order banning mask mandates in schools per court documents filed on Friday. The move reverses a decision from earlier in the week that paused the state's ability to enforce a ban on strict mask mandates in schools. The state will be able to resume punishing school districts that enforce mask mandates, which up until this point has included withholding funds from schools. There were some challenges to South Carolina's ban, but those challenges got pushed and denied right out of court by the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court did side with the ban on mandates. And I think that in South Carolina, it was because of the way they did it. It wasn't like an executive order or anything. It was actually put into the state budget and was voted on by the state Congress. So it's only on a year-to-year basis, but for the entire next fiscal year, you cannot mandate masks in any K through 12 school or higher institution that gets any state funding. So the way that they did it, I think, makes it less open to challenge. And I think that that's why it's a little different, and DeSantis had more trouble with it. So, says the big picture, Second Circuit Judge John Cooper ruled on Wednesday that Florida had to stop enforcing mask bans, refusing to issue a stay as the state appealed his decision. President Biden on Thursday announced the creation of a fund designed to cover funds that are withheld from the state because of their mask rules. So you have more tax dollars while people are getting fired and not able to pay taxes because of vaccine mandates. This is going to be great. And of course, DeSantis applauded the court's decision and said that he will continue to fight for parents' rights. So if anyone is interested in the actual documents, I'll put those in the chat. We have another article from the Daily Wire saying basically the same stuff. That the First Circuit Court of Appeals granted the state of Florida's request to reinstate the ban. We also had, I think actually that's the only good news. I guess that's the only good news. I thought I had a little more than that, but apparently not. So, okay. I saw that there were some other super chats that came in. Post American says the problem for this Chicagoan, yeah, well, is that I wouldn't know where to move to be free. I'm open to suggestions, but don't know where to go for them. I mean, I am pretty partial here to South Carolina. Florida's probably a good choice. I mean, it's tough because you're going to want to look at red states. Well, it also depends how much you care about the weather. You know, the Dakotas aren't too bad. Weather sucks. But, I mean, the problem is there is a lot of influx to some of these states that didn't shut down or didn't shut down for long. And unfortunately, along with that are leftists that are part of that influx. So I suppose what you would have to do is look at the big movers and shakers in the news and see what kind of policies they're putting forth. So, for example, here, McMaster, he's always trying to fight this Biden stuff. We have Rep. Stewart, who is doing amazing. We have a bill in Congress, the state Congress right now, to reinstate gold and silver as legal tender. They're trying to bring in biotech to make the state more independent. We do unfortunately have a influx of liberals coming in, but the upstate metro area is the reddest metro area. I don't know if it's in the whole country or just in the east, but it's a pretty big deal. And one of the theories behind getting open carry so easily passed is that it'll scare away the leftists. But if you can't get out, I just saw someone said that they have a farm on a dirt road with a 4x4. That'll do it for you. Empty pockets wood nickel, says Waco. Ugh. That is unfortunately, I think, why there are less people on the right that stand up, because historically, anytime the right has stood up to anything, they get shot down by the government. Or even not just the right, but like gun owners or people that just want to be left alone in general. Because I would not say that Waco was the right necessarily. But it was people that, were more conservative in nature and wanted to just be left alone. Same with Ruby Ridge. But then we have, Martin Heemeyer and the Killdozer. He did all right. John Morgan says that Blair White, so Blair White did not just move to California. She moved out of LA to Texas, and she's in Texas now. Texas, I'm afraid there's a lot of people from California, as John Morgan says. People aren't leaving California. California is metastasizing. There are people that are moving from California, and they're going to Texas. So, I don't know. It's tough. Butch Glancy says no place has plenty of water. Okie Rebel says the free state of Oklahoma. Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be a lot of people going to Oklahoma. That's probably a pretty safe bet. Missouri too. Missouri was in the news with the Second Amendment Preservation Act, and the feds are trying to fight that. So that's a good suggestion from La Mesa Dave there. Destiny Troll says, as they say, politics is downstream from culture, and I think Alaska has the most libertarian culture. Yeah, I saw someone else said that Alaska is to the north, but they have less taxes and more guns. I think that might have even been a super chat. So let me check that in here. Oh, it was not. Oh, yes, it was from Destiny Troll. Says Alaska isn't in the south, but we have lower taxes and more guns. Let's see. Andy says maybe we can get around the 100 employee vax mandate by getting classified as independent contractors. Yeah, I mean, that might be a way around it. Justin Baumgartner says if it's, we read that one about if it's war. Another thought is we'll see when the OSHA ruling comes out, like, is it 100 full-time employees? I mean, but you don't want to have to move all your people to part-time. Maybe there'd be some folks that if they're really against the mask mandates, they'd be willing to go 1099s and get some other perk with it. I mean, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, I need benefits or something, but there are ways around it. Cash. I don't know. Jesse says, I'm not sure if we can even call the current news to be news. Seems more like a sentencing to me. That is unfortunately quite accurate. Christoph says the reason Biden is not doing interstate travel bans first is the Supreme Court slapped the eviction moratorium movement threat argument. Oh, that's a good point. And it also brings up the whole thing of like, well, the eviction moratorium is ending at the same time that Biden is going to force people to lay off their employees. And his last jobs report was not great at all. There are just so many things coming together in this perfect storm right now. Christoph says, also happy birthday to both of us. Mine is Monday. Q says, Biden said I need a shotgun, so I have an AR-style shotgun coming from PSA. I hope you used my link. If not, that's okay. But yeah, I think my husband has one of those too. All of the things that he couldn't have in Massachusetts, he got like as soon as he could down here. So, all right. So for anyone that doesn't know what I'm talking about with this stuff with Biden, we're going to go into this. And the thing that he says that this is like a 6-prong approach, right? And I mean, there are 6 little headlines here under the plan of how he chooses to enact this. But some people are saying like, well, is that the full 6? Or is he going to be doing it in 6 stages and this is just stage 1? That remains to be seen. I don't think that even if this is like what he means by the 6 prongs or 6 stages of the plan, this isn't going to go over well, and it's not going to be his last attempt here. I can tell you that much. John Crump Live is here and says progressivism is a virus. Yeah. I mean, especially at this point, Patrick Wilford says, tread on those who tread on you. Accurate. So here is the details, the actual details of the plan without Biden's weird mumbling. And there was like a weird thing where he was talking about, he said that like 75% of the country is vaccinated, like 200 million people or something like that. And he made this really bizarre comment where he said, but the 25% of people aren't vaccinated, and it's not clear whether that's including the children who aren't even legally approved for the vaccine. But I mean, that's another thing entirely. But he made this really weird comment of like 25% of people aren't vaccinated, and in a country that's as big as ours, that's a quarter of all people. And it's like, no shit, 25% is a quarter of all the people. Like, but then, I don't think that he's the one behind this. Maybe he is. Maybe he's not just a puppet president, and maybe he's really this evil. But so his first step here is about vaccinating the unvaccinated. And he goes around all, how people 12 and up can get the vaccine, how there's 80,000 locations to get vaccinated nationwide, and how he's getting walk-in appointments at pharmacies. And so he's done all of this stuff so that everyone has it available. But to my knowledge, you still can't just walk into your doctor and get it. You have to get it somewhere else, which is kind of weird. Which reminds me, another suggestion that I've seen is, well, okay, so if vaccine manufacturers can't be held liable and companies are going to be requiring it, well, there might be a case then for holding these businesses and companies liable if you have an adverse reaction. So that's an interesting take. I don't know how well that would work. I don't know if there'd be a lawyer that would be willing to take that up, but if you get enough people together as like some sort of class action lawsuit or something, I mean, it might be doable. Okay, so he says since July, the share of job postings that require vaccination are up 90%. Apparently, there's going to be a Hocus Pocus 2, if you guys are familiar with that Halloween movie from like the early 90s or whenever it was. There's going to be a sequel to Hocus Pocus. And this guy, Tony Jones, he's pretty big in the Liberty community in Rhode Island, and he posted a copy of the casting call for it. It's even required, vaccination is required to even be an extra on the filming of Hocus Pocus. And there was a really weird tidbit in there too about how even if the person, the extra or the actor is a child, parents have to provide proof of COVID vaccination, but the vaccine isn't approved for kids under 12 yet. So I don't really know how that's going to work out. But even these stupid casting calls for extras for a stupid, probably made for TV sequel are requiring vaccines. But I mean, that's something that's happening in New England. He says, we know that these requirements work because Tyson Foods, when they announced their requirement, only 45% of its workforce had gotten a shot, and today it stands at 72%, meaning half of Tyson's unvaccinated workers have now gotten a shot well ahead of the company's November 1st deadline. Yeah, you know what else happened? I have folks that are on my Facebook that work at Tyson Foods, and there's also been massive worker walkouts because of these requirements. So that's really not going all that great for Tyson's Foods. And as they pointed out, even one day of a walkout, even a few hours of a walkout at some of these production plants at like Tyson, for example, that are already way behind because of all these shutdowns and lockdowns and things that happened last year and how that changed the supply and demand balance. One day of even 20 people walking out on the job over at Tyson's Foods is going to create shortages, and it's going to affect supply chains. And there's going to be, I imagine, a lot of companies where this stuff is happening, and it's going to be a massive ripple effect. So I feel like I've had to say this a million times over the last year and a half, but like if you've got some chest freezers or deep freezers or something, for heaven's sake, even if it's just to beat inflation, go out and buy yourself some bulk stuff from Costco or BJ's or Sam's Club or something. I saw somebody saying that they buy like a quarter beef for $3.50 a pound or something. Do something like that. Get yourself some emergency food kits. The ones from My Patriot Supply are pretty cheap. Sometimes some of the other companies have sales, but I've been looking at them too for like individual ingredients, and they're sold out of a lot of stuff. So there are a lot of people that are thinking this. Make sure that you have, if you can, money in crypto, ammo, firearms, precious metals, anything else, anything that could retain its value. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be stuff like that. People made fun of like the toilet paper buyers, but like, hey, you're always going to need toilet paper. So if you buy your toilet paper now, it's cheaper now than it will be in 6 months. It's cheaper now than it will be if like there's massive, crazy layoffs and supply chain shortages and all of this crap again, especially as we're getting ready to go into flu season. Anything that you think that you will need over the next 6 months or a year, like get it now. Because, I mean, if the stuff that Biden is pushing really does go through, if we have mass layoffs, if we have walkouts from these places, and even they're even staging walkouts at hospitals. There were ones in Maine. There's ones going on all over the country right now. Any of this stuff, upsets the balance between supply and demand, and that balance has already been upset because of all the lockdowns and the shutdowns and everything last year. I mean, it's just going to get worse. One of these headlines here, producer inflation accelerated in August as wholesale prices rose a record 8.3% from a year ago. It's the biggest increase on record going back to 2010. The move showed that inflationary pressures are likely to persist. We've seen headline after headline after headline about records being set. That came following a 7.8% move higher in July, which also set a record. We are seeing month after month record inflation. PPI is up 6.3% from a year ago. Everything is going up. Transportation and warehousing costs surged 2.8%. I mean, it's going up. 8.5% surge in meat prices. And this is before we have these walkouts at Tyson. Slaughtered poultry prices surged 11%. Things are not going to get cheaper. They're just going to keep going up and up. So Tyson Foods, Joe Biden, is not the greatest example. In Washington state, the weekly vaccination rate jumped 34% after the governor announced requirements for state workers. Blah, 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 blah. So that's his basis for this. So the first step in his plan, and here it is, ladies and gentlemen, requiring all employers, this is including the private sector, with 100 or more employees to ensure their workers are vaccinated or tested weekly. So here it says or tested weekly. But when you get into the details here, it says they have to produce a negative test result on at least a weekly basis before coming to work. The Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration is developing a rule that will require all employers with 100 or more employees to ensure their workforce is fully vaccinated, or require any workers who remain unvaccinated to produce a negative test result on at least a weekly basis. At least weekly. Before coming to work, OSHA will issue an emergency temporary standard to implement this requirement. This requirement will impact over 80 million workers in private sector businesses with 100 plus employees. 80 million. And what is not included in this little tidbit, let me find the AP article that was out about this yesterday. Because the AP article had some other details. Let's see. You know what? I know that I sent it to a friend on Facebook, so I'll pull the link up from there. Come on, Facebook, load. How do I search on desktop? This might take a second here. Oh, come on. Where is that article? Let's see. Oh, this might actually link it. Yes. Okay. So this is actually posted on an ABC website, but it seems to be the AP article because it says Washington AP. Okay, so the expansive rules, about 80 million Americans. Oh, this is not the one. There was one that came out before his press conference. The requirement for large companies to mandate vaccinations or weekly testing for employees will be enacted through a forthcoming rule from OSHA that carries penalties of $14,000 per violation, an administration official said. But there was a part in the original AP article that said that bit about if you don't get vaccinated, you have to go to your business's HR department. There has to be a way. You know what? I know that I can search on the mobile app. So I will look for this in the mobile app here. And then I'll send it to myself. We'll do it that way. There was lots of talk about this yesterday. Oh, goodness. I'm sorry, this is really unhelpful, guys. Oh, here we go. Okay, so that is the Biden link. And the article is right here. I will send it to myself, and then I'll pull it up for you guys. This is what happens when I don't properly prepare or get all of my links up ahead of time. But I mean, you guys have to see it. It's really pertinent. Okay. So here is, oh, darn it. They've updated the article. So it is not the same one. Oh, that's really unfortunate. Let's see if I can find, here we go. All right. Federal workers who won't comply will be referred to their agency's human resources departments for counseling and discipline to include potential termination. Yesterday, this said that this applied to private sector companies as well and was not just federal workers. So that is a new change in the article. But he also is going to require all federal employees and federal contractors to be vaccinated. If you don't get your vaccine, then you have to go to your HR department. There's also... So now we don't know, because the AP now is saying that this having to go to your HR department is for federal employees, where you get counseling and discipline. But yesterday, this article said that it was for private sector employees as well. So, going to require vaccines for all federal workers and millions of contractors that do business with the federal government. As part of this effort, the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Indian Health Service, and the National Institute of Health will complete implementation of their previously announced vaccination requirements that cover 2.5 million people. Here's another big one. Requiring COVID vaccinations for over 17 million healthcare workers at Medicare and Medicaid participating hospitals and other healthcare settings. So under this new thing from Joe Biden, if you work in any healthcare setting that receives Medicare or Medicaid reimbursement, including but not limited to hospitals, dialysis centers, ambulatory surgical settings, and home health agencies, you are now going to be required to get vaccinated. And this is going to apply to all nursing staff, as well as all hospital staff and all CMS regulated settings, including clinical staff, individuals providing services under arrangements, volunteers, and staff who are not involved in direct patient, resident, or client care. There are folks that I know that work for companies like this that work remotely at home and are still now going to be required to be vaccinated when they don't even physically go into the building that houses patients or does any kind of medical or health care at all. So they're saying that this will apply to an additional 50,000 providers above the original, however many million that the first mandates did. And then here's another one: calling on large entertainment venues to require proof of vaccination or testing for entry. So his plan would call on entertainment venues. Now remember, last week or the week before, he was mandating it. So in this, he's calling on entertainment venues like sports arenas, large concert halls, and other venues, including where wedding receptions are held, as my friend can vouch, where large groups of people gather, to require that their patrons be vaccinated or show a negative test for entry. But it turns out that in places like New York, where we're having vaccine passports, people aren't wanting to deal with getting their employees tested or dealing with testing results. And so, yeah, they're just, as people in the chat have said, they're just putting people on unpaid leave. Going to require employers to provide paid time off to get vaccinated. Now, further protecting the vaccinated, the thing about the COVID vaccine is it doesn't stop you from catching COVID or spreading COVID. And that's a narrative, well, that's a truth, rather, that's been getting buried because the CDC has also chosen to no longer count breakthrough cases unless those cases are severe enough to get hospitalized. So we don't really know how many breakthrough cases there are. But regardless, the way that the narrative is being pushed, like, if it really protected you that much, then why do you need to be protected from unvaccinated people? And he even says, like, oh, there's only one confirmed positive case of a breakthrough infection per 5,000 fully vaccinated Americans per week. But again, they're only counting the breakthrough infections that are bad enough to get hospitalized. And so he's going to now do booster shots, providing easy access to booster shots for all eligible Americans and ensuring Americans know where to get a booster. So we now have booster shots starting the week of the 20th. 10 days to go get your booster, my friends. Here's the bit about keeping schools open. And he says that there are governors that are basically saying F around and find out and putting these bans on mask mandates. And the thing is so South Carolina has a ban on mask mandates in schools. That doesn't mean that you can't wear a mask if you want to. It just means that schools can't make it a requirement of already compulsory education. And he says that this is a sign that governors are being cavalier with children's health, and to ensure that people are protected. The FDA is undergoing a process now to evaluate a vaccine for children under the age of 12, and under the president's plan, the administration will do whatever it takes to support these efforts while continuing to respect and defer to the scientific decision-making of the agency. So they're going to require staff and Head Start programs and schools to get vaccinated, calling on all states to adopt vaccine requirements for all school employees, and here we go, providing additional funding to school districts for safe school reopening, including backfilling salaries and other funding withheld by states for implementing COVID safety measures. And the thing is, he says that there's all these brave school districts and school superintendents and administrators that are trying to protect children's health by requiring masks. I believe it was last week it might have been the week before, that I talked about the whole big controversy here in South Carolina of the school district that couldn't require masks, and then was in the news because they had to, after a week, go into virtual because they had a bunch of kids on quarantine. We talked about that. But the thing is so these people at these schools, they're like, oh, well, it's because we didn't have a mask mandate. Well, okay. So they are supposedly working so hard to protect children's health, but really, I mean, it's a purely political move because, like, okay, so they don't have they can't require masks, but you know what? They didn't have hand sanitizer in classrooms. They didn't put children in pods or cohorts, and I don't really think children should be subjected to that anyways, but these were the measures that were taken last year that were said to be so successful. They didn't do any of them. They had all the different children and classes commingling. They did not have the plastic dividers between desks. They did not enforce any kind of social distancing. They weren't watching to make sure that kids like washed their hands. They weren't doing any of the other measures that schools had in place last year that were supposedly so successful. They just said, like, oh, well, we can't have masks. We're not going to do any of this other shit either to prove a political point. And that is exactly what they did. And Joe Biden is praising these people, saying that they care so deeply about children's health and that they're just trying to keep children safe. Well, then why weren't you doing any of these other things? If that is the argument, that all of these other things also kept children safe last year, why are we saying, well, they're working so hard when they didn't implement any of the other possible measures at their disposal and are instead blaming masks or kids not being vaccinated when they're not even old enough to be vaccinated? Stupid Joe Biden. So using the Department of Education's full legal authority to protect students' access to in-person instruction, and here it is. The American Rescue Plan provides $130 billion to states, school districts, and tribes to support the safe reopening of schools. You know what a school in Washington state did with their share of the $130 billion? And this will be the next video out. They gave children ankle monitors to make sure they were social distancing and tracking them in school. That's what a school in Washington state did with their part of the $130 billion. So I don't think they're really caring that much. So it says that they're going to make additional funds available beyond the American Rescue Plan dollars to help local school districts fill gaps when funding has been withheld by their state for implementing COVID safety measures. None of these schools are preventing any other safety measures. They're just saying you have to let parents choose whether their kids wear a mask. And I know that there are arguments of, well, it stops the virus, blah, 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 blah. And we can argue until the cows come home whether or not that's true. There are also studies that have come out that have said, well, gee, you know, these kids that aren't getting the full social interaction of like full facial expressions, that are being held on lockdown, that are subject to all of these measures and the social isolation that comes with lockdowns and masking, children on average have lost 10 IQ points. We talked about that study. There are children that are now showing huge developmental deficits because of this stuff. So you can't say that there are no side effects. It comes to a point where a family has to make a choice of like, okay, you know, would I rather them potentially get this virus that for the most part is not really affecting children, or would I rather them have a possibly permanent developmental delay that stunts their growth for the rest of their life and affects all of their interpersonal relationships and interactions. I mean, that's a pretty big deal, and parents should be able to make that choice, is my argument, and is the argument of the governing body and the governing folks here in South Carolina. And so Joe Biden is just going to take this money out of the printing press in his ass and be making it rain on schools that are not allowed to mandate masks. Apparently. And he's like, oh, we're also going to restore funding withheld by state leaders or, school board members who had their salaries or had their pay cut. I'm willing to bet this is not going to include the school board members that were like, we can't require a COVID vaccination for school because it's not even approved by the FDA yet. Bet it's not going to be any of those folks that were canned or had their salaries cut because of that. And they're going to do student and school staff testing regularly. See, that's another thing, is these other schools here that were like, oh, okay, well, we can't have masks. They didn't even do testing. Increasing testing and requiring masks. This is where he talks about, I think it's this little section, or no, it's this section about working with Walmart, Kroger, and Amazon. Here we go. Walmart, Amazon, and Kroger to sell those tests at cost for the next 3 months. Expanding pharmacy testing, continuing to require masking for interstate travel, and doubling the fine. So there was already a fine if you did not wear a mask while in an airport, and now the TSA is doubling those fines. And when he spoke about this in his presser, he was like, come on, guys, please have some respect, which is dang ironic given the circumstances, requiring masking on federal property, blah, 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 blah. There's way more, but those are the big ones. So you guys can see that there. And I mean, the presser is worth watching. I mean, check this out. So this is on the White House YouTube. And as per usual, comments are turned off. Check this out. 1,000 likes versus 7.7 thousand dislikes. And now that it's even been marked as unlisted, so you have to get the link from a news article. You can't even just go to the White House YouTube and find it. Absolutely ridiculous. I think that the vast majority of Americans don't support this. Ironically enough, we have this clip here from April, I believe, April 2021. I won't play it because I'll have to move my microphone around. But in it, Nancy Pelosi says, here's the thing. We cannot require someone to be vaccinated. That's just not what we can do. If we could, but we can't require vaccinations of the members, much less for the American people. Some people want to say, don't come into my store unless you're vaccinated, this or that. It causes commotion. It's a matter of privacy to know who is or isn't, she said. So even at one point, Nancy Pelosi was saying, well, we can't enact a vaccine mandate on Congress, and we can't enact one federally on the American people. It's unconstitutional. She said that in April. That did not age well. I also had a clip that I posted to Twitter of Jen Psaki saying, well, Biden's never going to mandate vaccines because he can't. Well, he just did, or at least he tried. And even the Washington Post is saying, how many Americans will buck Biden's vaccine and testing mandate and just quit their jobs? That's an excellent question. And even if the Washington Post is asking it, I mean, that's a pretty serious question. And they say that mostly it's going to be GOPers. But again, we saw there was an expose even by the New York Times that said, well, the vast majority of unvaccinated people are poor people of color. And it's not necessarily just, these like racist right wingers that the media always likes to say. And they say that there is indeed evidence that many Americans, the vast majority of the unvaccinated, in fact, claim to be dug in against employer vaccine mandates. But they're saying that it's a false choice. And even Joe Biden himself said that it's a false choice. He said it's not an issue of freedom or choice. It's just, it is what it is. And that's it. So we have the RNC has announced that they're suing Biden over the vaccine mandate. We have the Daily Wire CEO, Jeremy Boring, is gearing up to do some kind of lawsuit. And we also have, where is the list? So these are governors. I'm actually going to reload this in case there's been any updates. So these are some of the governors that have already come out against it and said that they're going to be either doing some kind of lawsuit or working at the state level to nullify this. We have Tate Reeves of Mississippi, Brian Kemp of Georgia, Kristi Noem of South Dakota, Henry McMaster of South Carolina. We will fight them to the gates of hell to protect the liberty and livelihood of every South Carolinian, he says. Doug Ducey, I don't know, governor of Arizona. Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, Kim Reynolds of Iowa, Greg Gianforte of Montana, and I believe that they have already also made it illegal to discriminate on vaccine status with businesses. I'm not really sure. That's a meme that my sister-in-law posted on Facebook today. Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma, Kay Ivey of Alabama, Greg Abbott, Texas, and Mike Parsons of Missouri. And those were just the ones as of yesterday. I am sure that there will be more. Kentucky lawmakers have overturned a school mask mandate. So there's definitely going to be people that are fighting this, but you can see there's definitely a clear line in the sand as to who is going to fight it and who isn't. Donald Bumbarger says, not public schools, call them government schools. Well, I mean, it is one and the same. Jesse Sewell says, don't worry, everyone. The new war will pay for everything, or at least be a good excuse to rob you. I mean, it is an excellent example of the broken window fallacy in economics, which is basically the idea of like, you have a town that is suffering with a poor economy. Well, go and break some windows, because then it's going to force the town to employ people to go fix those windows, and it's going to fix the economy. No, because you still lost the capital of having to replace the windows in your business and having to shut down your business for however many days while the windows were being fixed. I definitely urge everyone to look into the broken window fallacy. I believe that was Bastiat that put that. People want a link to the Biden presser. Here you go. Now you guys have the link for that. Sorry, I didn't check the chat in a few minutes, and I kind of went off on a tangent there. Don Turnblade says that he's vaccinated, but that coerced vaccination offends him deeply. Persuasion is for free people. Coercion is what the oppressed get. Absolutely. Scott Hebert says the Zorg argument on how economies work. So James Davison says tips and advice to survive. Well, I've already mentioned, preparing the best you can financially, monetarily, hedging your bets against inflation, buying things now, having a deep freezer full of food, emergency supplies, things like that. You're going to want a generator. Your basic like survival prepping stuff, but also, I don't want to say stay away from the news if you're finding the news too upsetting, because then you won't watch me. So I'm a little biased there, but I mean, if you're really finding that the news and this stuff is affecting your life that deeply, then take a step back from it. What I've done is, because I do this, for you guys, I do these live streams, I do videos. I have said to folks in my personal life, except for, my husband and a very select few that is more like commiserating with me about the state of the world rather than arguing with it. For the vast majority of people in my personal life, I have said, you know what? Politics is my work now. Politics is completely off the table in my free time and in my personal life. It's just not something that I'm willing to discuss with anyone anymore, because I need to have that boundary and I need to have some peace in my life. I would say, make sure that you set aside some time every single day that you can to just relax and do something that you love and that you cherish, even if it's only 10 minutes. If you have a family, spend time with your family, spend time with your kids, make connections with your loved ones. If there are folks that you really care about and you've kind of fallen off connection with them, or you don't talk as much as you would like send them a text, give them a phone call, try and re-spark that connection if it's a connection that you want to keep. Talisman says, doll, you need to keep the balance. Exactly. You need to try to find some kind of balance to keep yourself sane. And I would say, a little bit of like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, thrown in here. If you get to the point where you find yourself being really overwhelmed by what's happening in the world, and this is a lot easier said than done, but if you have a friend that's really logical, you can kind of enlist them in this. So, the perfect example is like what I said at the beginning, where I was sort of, getting the hormonal third trimester anxiety a week early. And I was just like spiraling and catastrophizing about the backup plan and the backup plan to the backup plan and all of this. And, my husband was like, well, okay, worst case scenario, this happens. Worst case scenario, like we have 2 freezers full of food. Worst case scenario, we have emergency food supplies. Worst case scenario, we have a generator. Worst case scenario, there's a stream in our backyard. Worst case scenario, we're friends with our neighbors and they grow their own food. Worst case scenario, we have connections with our community. Worst case scenario, we live in one of the freer states that still exists in this country. Worst case scenario, we have hedged our bets against inflation as best as we can. Worst case scenario, we have dormers on our house. they give you the higher ground advantage. Jameson Wilfon is telling me to hydrate. Yes, I have not done that. Donald Baumbarger says that for him, loading ammo reduces stress. If that's something that reduces stress for you, then do it. Make sure that you're getting, if you can, get a little exercise every day to get those natural endorphins and the dopamine going, even if it's just taking a walk in the woods, if you have woods near you, or taking a walk and just trying to notice the things around you. Like if you're in a city, the way that the sunlight is hitting the buildings or something, like something to like ground you back into the here and now of reality. Get some sunlight every day, take vitamins, eat well. I mean, just generally things that can help keep you healthy, because I mean that's the best thing that you can do for your mental health, but also your physical health, and to help stave off any sicknesses. um Someone in the chat, I don't know how to pronounce your name and I'm sorry, Chel maybe, says rooftop Koreans for the win. If you are someone that likes to read. Stop reading dystopian fiction. It will not help you. I had to stop doing this, and I love dystopian fiction. I had to stop reading dystopian fiction. I can't handle it anymore. It's too realistic. It stresses me out too much. What I had someone do that I was working with on coaching, they were getting really sucked into the news. If you still want to be informed, but you're getting too overwhelmed by it, set a time every day and say to yourself, say if it's like 6 p.m. at night, I'm only going to look at the news or catch up on the news between 6 and 7 p.m. at night. That's it. The rest of the day is off limits, and try to like compartmentalize that. Things like that is what I would say. Ting Ting says that they're building cabinets, love learning the router table and table saw. Perfect example. I mean, and that's a valuable skill too. Bill Osby says to get into black powder shooting. It's dirty, but fun. Robert Graham says he doesn't need to read dystopian fiction, that he is living in it. James Davison also has a good tip. Buy maps and learn your area well. Oh, okay, it's pronounced shell. Okay. Thank you. I'll try to remember that. Pregnancy brain cannot guarantee, but yeah, learning your area and buying maps is a good one. My husband he hasn't been buying maps, but he's been trying to get everywhere without the GPS. And that will never work for me because I have no sense of direction. Butch says that you can download topographical maps for free, so that's a good idea. If something were to ever happen to your cell phone, you would lose them, but I mean, still, that's something. Someone else I just saw, Manual Gear Shift, says that he's on the backup plan, WTF now plan. Yeah. Gecko says that Lexapro works for them. Yeah, I mean, for some people, that's what works. I have skipped on super chats reading the rest of the other comments, so I'm going to jump into the super chats real quick here. Let's see. So Jesse's suggestion, Jesse Meek, he's biased for Kansas, but he says Kansas has some of the best and lenient gun laws in the nation. Ricky Hendricks says that the Postal Service is exempt because we can't do without postal delivery, but Biden is willing to sacrifice all other employees and the economy and the country. Well, the funny thing about the Postal Service is, I don't know if this has changed recently, but when I had some friends and family working for them, they actually didn't hire full-time employees anymore. All of their employees are considered temps or the new employees because they lay them off for a week or two every year so they don't have to provide them benefits. So that might also be a loophole for them. I don't really know. Gito463 says, my work, IT, does some subcontracting, and we were contracted to do some on-site work for Google. They mandated any employees that going there to be vaccinated. Yeah, I mean, Google is one of the companies that did put that out there. Steve Pat says that he had a patient last week who wanted to get fully vaccinated but had a really bad reaction to the first dose. Can't get the second dose by these new standards. She will remain a second-class citizen. Exactly. I saw someone today that said their husband doesn't want to get it because he has a history of getting blood clots as reactions to medications and, even just sitting too long, and being that that is a known possible side effect, he doesn't want to risk it. I think that's completely valid. But I mean, so what? Like, does that mean that he can't keep his job now? I mean, some of these places, they're going to say like, okay, well, you can have they said that there would be very limited exemptions. They haven't said what those exemptions are and how you get one. So like the exemption for flying on an airplane, for example, is that you have to go see a TSA doctor and get approved by the TSA and their doctor for a medical exemption by TSA standards. I don't know if there's a lot of physicians that would sign off on something like that, because I mean, the medical industry and the medical field being what it is, a lot of times they're worried about liability issues, and they don't want to do anything that could bring a lawsuit down on them later. It's the same reason that, when you do have some folks in the mental health field that do believe in the Second Amendment, you're never going to find them to write a letter to reinstate your Second Amendment rights. And I know there's a whole argument of you shouldn't have to reinstate those, but the law being what it is, you're never going to find a physician or doctor or mental health practitioner, even if they believe in the Second Amendment, to sign off on that. Because then, like, if that person goes and commits a crime, who gets sued? Whoever wrote that letter or signed off on that. So I think that we would have similar things with trying to do exemptions for vaccinations. In some places, there are religious exemptions, and not all states have them. I don't think that the federal government would allow that. I don't know if companies would allow that. If they did, I mean, there might be lawsuits, but I mean, how long is that going to take? We don't know. Steve Pat also says that his hospital forced them to get the vaccine or be fired. Sucks to work through the entire pandemic without a vaccine, and they thank us for our work, then turn around and threaten to fire us. Yeah, I have several friends that are in that same situation. Matoko Urashima says that Tim Pool says the post office is exempt from the federal vaccine mandate because they wouldn't comply. I mean, that's possible. I don't know, though. You have a lot of drunk people at the post office. I don't know how much they would care. Destiny Troll says, gotta say it's interesting to see the gun tubers, libertarians, and prepper channels starting to cross over more and more. Well, I mean, there are some people that classify me as a purely libertarian channel. There are some people that classify me purely as a gun tuber. So those two have always been mixed. I've always been interested in prepping, but it was nothing that I really openly talked about until COVID, because it was kind of like, well, there were other channels for that. But yeah, it's interesting, the crossover. Jameson Wilfon says it's not about a virus with a 99% recovery rate. It's about controlling people. Mr. Rover Pilot says, Liberty Doll, this sounds more and more like the clip I shared on Facebook from the TV show Utopia. By the way, hello, Dolly, worked late. Yeah, that show was interesting. Steve Pat also says that Michael Malice made a good point. The government has to focus on COVID and people who don't get vaccinated because they can't use Trump to divide us anymore. Hope you and Liberty Bun are doing well. And I did see there were some people that were asking for the bump. Ting Ting does have a good point. It says, want to see them go postal? Tell the post office to get vaxxed. Yeah. I mean, going postal is a real thing. My dad is a retired postal worker. I have friends that worked at the post office. It's legit. So here is the bump. Oh, let's see. Boom. Large and in charge. And she is quite fond of trying to do full body stretches the minute I turn out my light to try to fall asleep, but I'm actually amused by it. I think that it is funny. David Neal says, anyone remember the line from the old movies, papers, please? I think I've used that in videos before, actually. Jameson Wilfon says, my doctors don't ask, so I don't tell them about my 2A interest. Well, this is for people, what I was talking about of those letters, and I'll have to sign off pretty soon. Those letters is for people that were at one point were like hospitalized or went into substance abuse treatment, so that then makes them a prohibited person. You can allegedly get a doctor, mental health professional, whatever, to sign off for you that that is no longer an issue and you are perfectly healthy and mentally sound, and so you can have your rights reinstated. It's next to impossible to find someone to do that, and if they do it, it's going to be under very certain circumstances, and they're still going to request some kind of restrictions. That did happen to someone that I know. I guess people are asking how far along I am. Tomorrow is 27 weeks. So, starting tomorrow is the last week of the second trimester. Whoo, boy. Destiny Troll says, my doctor builds his own AR-15s. Yeah, my doctors here, pretty similar. My chiropractor, I actually picked him specifically for his qualifications, but also because on his website it said that he enjoys hunting. So James Davison says that distilled water is good to store because it lasts the longest. I would say if you are going to the point of you're going to store water, get water purification tablets, because water does go bad after a while if you are storing it. If your state allows it, and I suppose even if it doesn't, rainwater collection, that's also an option. James Davidson asks if I am delivering at home. I am not. My husband's a little freaked out about the idea of a home birth, and I mean, it being my first kid, I can see that. Unfortunately, the birth center that was run by my midwives was closed down by the hospital system because it was too much competition. So unfortunately, I will be in the hospital, but so far I'm low risk, so I'll be at the low risk wing with the midwives, at which you're not required to get any medical interventions. I mean, unless, it's a risk to the baby or something like that. But so I'll be able to use the tub. I'll be able to use the shower. I'll be able to have just a port and not actually be hooked up to IV fluids. I'll be able to drink. I'll be able to eat. The midwives will just have to turn their backs and pretend that they don't see it. My goal is to do it naturally and unmedicated. Hopefully I don't have to be induced or anything like that, because that shakes things up a bit, but that is my goal. So Lenio Barcelo says, imagine not allowing collecting rainwater. There are some states that do that, but it's just about 9 o'clock, and I'm supposed to be at my D&D call and letting everyone into the room so they can go do that. Robert Graham also has a good suggestion. Life straws. That is also a good suggestion. Oh, really? I did not know this. Thank you, Joshua Queen. Says that My Patriot Supply is now selling emergency water in pouches that last for 5 years. That is pretty cool. That is pretty cool. James Davison is saying to walk as long as possible. I am still exercising pretty much every day. I go to a Zumba class 2 or 3 times a week for an hour to an hour and a half. I'm still lifting weights. I had my first sign of exercise intolerance in my abs today, which was actually disappointing, but getting this far without having that happen is pretty good. So I'm going to have to shuffle some of that stuff around, but I am still very active. But anyways, yes, I have to go let the folks into the D&D room. I'm sure that our DM is watching this right now and is going to have something to say about it when I pop into the other room. So thanks for everyone that tuned in. I didn't think we'd have as big of a crowd here as we did tonight because of the topic. So Michael Tomlinson, sir, said that he learned that he can own a tank. So I'm glad that there are folks that learned something. And everyone stay safe over the weekend. Thank you to the mods in the chat. Thank you to everyone who donated with super chats. Thanks to all the folks that are over on Patreon and Subscribestar. Thanks for the likes and thumbs up. Shell, I'm really gonna try to remember the pronunciation of your name for next time, not last time. I think that I thanked everyone. But thanks for hanging out for like the extra half hour, just about too. And have a good weekend, everybody. And I will see you at the next video and the next stream. Good night, everyone. Bye.